Dave Sholer, Certified Public Accountant and owner, Integrated Accounting Solutions.
My name is Dave Sholer. I am a CPA based here in Davis. My business is Integrated Accounting Solutions. I work specifically with dental practices, and I provide them bookkeeping, payroll, and tax services.
What was your pathway to becoming a certified public accountant and business owner?
My path to becoming a CPA is a little atypical. My parents always said that I could be anything that I wanted to be as long as I was a doctor or a lawyer. I say that somewhat in jest. So I decided I was going to be a doctor, a physician. I started here at UC Davis down a pre-med path as a genetics major. And a couple of years in, I realized that I didn't have the best chemistry with chemistry, to say the least. And my grades were probably not going to get me into med school. I also realized that I wasn't incredibly passionate about medicine, and I was going down that path for the wrong reasons. But still, I was 2 years in, and probably should have changed my major at that point, but I didn't. So I graduated. My undergrad degree is in genetics. I started working immediately, actually the day after graduation, which I do not advocate, for a biotech company. And it took me about 2 years to have an epiphany. All of a sudden, I realized that I wanted to be a CPA. I started connecting all the dots in all of the things that I like to do for fun. Every student organization that I was involved in, lots of things that I did on my own time. Even when I was a kid, I used to play with invoices and do silly, nerdy things like that for fun. I loved it. And I didn't really realize that I could do that for a living. And so it took me a little while to realize that my innate skills, combined with ultimately what I enjoy doing, could be something that I do on a daily basis. So, and ultimately also, I didn't really understand the breadth of careers that were available. I think most students don't really know that until later on in life, which makes it incredibly difficult to pick a path in the first place. So as soon as I realized that was an option, I made a plan to go back to school. I went back to Sac State and got an MBA. Then after that, I took a whole bunch of accounting classes, enough to sit for the CPA exam. And while I was still employed in the biotech world, I passed all the exams and eventually made the transition. I worked here in Davis at an accounting firm for 3 years and ultimately decided to go out on my own.
Why is it important for business owners to understand accounting?
Accounting is really just the process of summarizing a business's performance into numbers, into financial metrics. It provides information that's useful for both the business owner and also for any stakeholders and any investors that may be involved in the business. I believe the stat is that 50% of businesses will fail within their first 5 years. Most of the time, business owners are really, really good at what they do. That's how they got into whatever business they might be doing. And they may not be quite as experienced or innately talented at some of the behind the scenes business elements, including the financial accounting. And so for that reason, when I interact with my clients, it's very common to hear any business owner to say, well, I'm not a numbers person. And ultimately, my advice is that any business owner, no matter what their skills may be, they've got to understand the numbers. They have to know how to read a financial report, and they need to know this to be able to evaluate trends, to fix any problems that may exist before it's too late. Given that, of course, these talents aren't naturally occurring in everybody, step one is to find the right team, a bookkeeper, an accountant, and to make sure that it's a good trusted relationship, but also that you are able to determine what metrics are helpful for you as a business owner to routinely check to make sure that things are looking okay. So it's good to trust your advisor, your CPA, but it's also really important that you know how to read your own financial statements and that you are proactively going into your books to stay ahead of anything that may be uncovered months down the road.
What are the most common misunderstandings in business accounting?
From my perspective, the three most common misunderstandings of accounting are cash flow, planning for taxes, and the timing of bookkeeping. And I'll walk through those. So first off, cash flow. For example, every time that I evaluate a client who's looking to purchase a dental practice, I will do a 12 to 24 month cash flow projection. And that's looking at the timing of projected revenue and the timing of every single category of expense month by month. And so this is important because a business can be incredibly profitable or really good at what they do, but none of that matters if the cash isn't there. Whether that is from self-funding with revenue as it comes in, or via external lender funding, it's important to make sure that the business is going to continue to be in operations with enough cash by looking at the monthly ins and outs of cash flow. So that is incredibly important to project. And it's step one every time I look at any business that someone's looking to purchase or just trying to understand what may be going wrong. The next most important thing that goes hand in hand with that is planning for taxes and setting aside money for taxes if need be. Depending upon how the business is structured, and how the revenue is recognized, the timing of which it is, taxes may be different or will be different for everybody. So it's really important that a business owner understand the tax implication of their income and to know when those payments would be due. And this should be built into the cash flow projection that the business puts together. Usually, ideally, if cash isn't plentiful, I recommend that folks set aside cash into a savings account just to make sure they don't get behind. It is unfortunately far too common for small businesses to get into this really downward death spiral where they owe a bunch of taxes from last year, let's say, and they are trying to make payments on that, and they just get behind in the next year and the next year, and it becomes this cycle where the IRS and Franchise Tax Board, they won't go away, and the debt isn't going to go away, and ultimately it's got to be planned for. So it's something that's really easy to get ahead of with just a little bit of planning. And unfortunately, we spend maybe a little bit too much time on learning how to calculate the area of unusual shapes in school, and not how to pay our taxes. So fortunately, though, it's really not that difficult. And with the right team to fill in some of those gaps of knowledge, it's pretty simple to figure out a plan to make sure you don't get too far behind. And lastly, and this goes hand in hand with the first two things I mentioned, is just the timing of bookkeeping. Unfortunately, it's really just way too common for bookkeeping for any business to happen significantly after the fact. In the older days, it would be maybe just once a year, once a quarter, or even if it's monthly bookkeeping, it might be several months behind. With cloud-based accounting software, one of the biggest ones is QuickBooks Online, but there's several other. It's very easy to connect accounts and to keep transactions updated on a daily basis, which is what I do for the dental practices that I work with. And so for that reason, on any given day, we know that the books are just about up to date. And that allows us to project forward our cash flow, project forward our tax liabilities, and to not get behind, also to recognize any negative trends before they become a problem. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't require having a third party, someone that you're paying, a bookkeeper, an accountant. A lot of these cloud-based accounting software systems are something that can be used by someone with very little accounting training. That being said, it's also not all too difficult to mess things up in such a way that is significant when it comes to tax time. So it's probably a good idea to have someone with some knowledge to check it out as well.
What would you tell people considering becoming a certified public accountant?
For students who are considering becoming a CPA, probably the best advice that I could give based on my own experience is to plan ahead for the CPA exam. The CPA exam, at least currently, is split into 4 parts, all of which are, I believe, between 4 and 6 hours each. And they are incredibly difficult, mainly just because they cover huge amounts of material. The biggest mistake that I've seen folks get into is not setting aside enough time, trying to take more than one section of the exam at the same time, or trying to do either of those things while working in a position that is just too demanding. If your work is requiring you, as many of the big 4 international accounting firms do, require you to work 60, 70, 80 plus hours a week, it becomes very difficult to carve out enough margin in your life to also study and to be motivated to study when you're already really tired. So I would recommend that if you do want to go down that path, trying to ensure that you're not working at a position that is just too demanding of time, and just to be honest with the needs of the exam. And also to not take more than one at the same time. It is a lot of content. And on that same note, and this is a more controversial response perhaps, but in the accounting industry, there is a lot of pressure at times to join one of the big 4 accounting firms. A lot of people will say that you, at some point, or really at the beginning of your career, need to start out working for one of the big 4 accounting firms that will have those really demanding hours. And from my experience, that's really not true. Of course, it depends on the direction that you want to go in your career. But most of the time in those bigger firms, your exposure to the types of things that you're working on is going to be incredibly narrow. And if you plan to stay in one of those large international firms for your whole career, that may be fantastic. That's a great path, albeit extremely demanding and may have some difficulty in work-life balance. But it is definitely not required. It's definitely not a path that really, I think, the majority of accountants go down. And if you are looking for some really good experience with a greater breadth of scenarios that you will encounter, working for a more local accounting firm is probably the best way to get that experience.
Dave Sholer, certified public accountant and owner, Integrated Accounting Solutions.